good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on what time of day it is when you're listening. Welcome to episode 5 of The Lockdown with me, Ricardo. I'm just an ordinary guy in extraordinary times, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. So here we are, day 5. Day 5, people. I had the opportunity today to go outside to pick up necessary groceries as well as medication. The groceries were part of a what could we call them? A cache or a loot gathering exercise, which half of which was being split with my older parents-in-law, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and they are of the older generation, therefore in the very high-risk category. And I had the opportunity to go out. Since the lockdown, I haven't set foot outside at all, other than being in a tiny little garden. I've not been outdoors or gone anywhere. Or I see a lot of people saying that they sometimes feel cooped up, so they just sort of go to the shop. And I think that's maybe a little bit short-sighted. So I try to avoid that as much as possible. But today was an opportunity to do that. And I took the opportunity, not just because I had to, which I did, but also just I wanted to do it because I want to be able to say I did. It's a strange thing, isn't it, humans, to say that you did it at that time, to do something, or, to climb a freaking mountain. Why do people do it? Just because they do. They want to be able to say they have, or they want the experience. So what was my experience like? Well, I could compare the traffic and general buzz to that of a Sunday morning in Johannesburg, which I don't really know if that bodes well or not so well in terms of the lockdown, but it was very, very much a Sunday morning, quietish, and obviously only certain shopping destinations were open. So I went to a smaller shopping center, sort of a convenience center, and I was able to have a look around a bit. And what was good to see was that, yes, there was definitely an attempt, a successful one, by two of the retailers that I went to at least, and by walking around a little, I did see that all of the sort of supermarkets and other retailers that were open, they all were doing the right thing. They really were trying, and that's good. That's fantastic. People also, it's fascinating as I was walking around, the feeling that other human beings are now potentially able to infect me, and I'm potentially able to infect them. Like there's this weird, every person is now not an enemy, but there's a heightened sense of awareness, and that's the first thing that struck me. So I have this cotton sort of mask that was sewn. I bought it from someone on Facebook. I bought a few of them. And already what struck me was that just after a few minutes, the sort of unfamiliarity and the discomfort of wearing a mask on your face really struck me. And I remember seeing video clips of, I think it would be nurses and doctors in China, where they've done 13-hour shifts, and they take those masks off, and their nose, the bridge of their nose, is bruised brown. Dark brown. It's like bruised from the pressure of that metal strip in their masks. And they all said that it's the most relieving. If you've ever done any waitering, or you're on your feet the whole day, or anything like that, where you take your shoes off or something along those lines, there's such a relief. And they were saying that that's the highlight, one of the highlights of their day, short of video calling their children and family. They just, the relief of taking off the gear is so big. And I mean, I experienced that over the course of 1.5 hours of sort of buying things, putting them in the car, going back into the next shop, and so on. And I went to a pharmacy Everything was very well sort of organized. People were being kept back, and then the amount of people in the store was controlled properly, and that felt very good. That really did feel very good. And there was both this sense of surrealness where everybody is a potential threat and you're a threat, but at the same time a sense of unification, particularly with people that you could see were taking, they had the same sort of level of awareness as you. They were keeping their distance. They may have masks on or gloves or whatever may be the case. There is a sense that we are in this together. And for me, that's, it's funny that it takes trauma so often to bring people together. Whether that keeps them together, I say this, but at the very same time, in that queue of getting into the pharmacy, I saw a woman, and she was quarreling and bickering and shouting at this security, this gentleman who was doing security at the door. And I don't know the context, but I just thought to myself, wow, that's really short-sighted and not so fun. Here you are shouting at this guy, and he is at the front line, essentially. He's going to be seeing, and people are going to be walking past him in their thousands over the course of the next while. I don't know where he goes home to. I'm assuming it's not a suburb. I'm assuming it's a little bit harder and harsher than the place the woman would go home to. And this is an assumption, but I'm probably not far off. And I just thought, wow, in a moment like this, to bicker about, whether or not he said that she could go in and then he didn't, or something, some small little disagreement. I don't know. We are strangers people sometimes. We really are. But again, we do live in a society and in a world that raises and is designed for you to work separate, independently, and achieve your own individualist ideas and ideals. So you're designed that way. At school, you're taught to be the best individual. Don't care, don't worry what your classmates are doing. You do the best you can. You don't worry. You don't. It's about you. And I think there's definitely Western style there's a Western way and there's an Eastern way. And I think there is something about the hive mind, if I can call it that, or the sort of ant colony style, beehive colony setup, where countries sort of think of themselves as part of the collective. Again, there are positives, there are negatives, there are trade-offs. I'm not saying one or the other. I'm not siding with one or the other. I'm just sort of saying I think it stems from this feeling of individualism and feeling like you have to have an individual identity, right down to the fact that we buy stuff which supposedly reflects our tastes and what our values are. Otherwise, if you think about it, how many types of damn toothpaste do you need? How many watch straps do you need? There's infinite variety of stuff. And that's also what struck me. Another thing that struck me was in the aisles and aisles and aisles of miscellaneous stuff in that pharmacy. They had cordoned off all but sort of 4 aisles. Your sort of supplements and vitamins and your baby section, your toiletry section. These were all available. But everything else in the middle, all the beauty products, cosmetics, sort of funny travel gadgets, and everything in between, those things were closed. And I sort of went to, geez, I need none of this actually. I need none of this stuff. The stuff, how much, and I thought about this, how much of the stuff that fills the thousands and thousands of square meters, or square feet if you're in a different country to mine, how much of that stuff is actually necessary in any way, shape, or form? Like the bulk isn't, It's fascinating. It's just like, when that stuff's removed. On the flip side, what I did find is when I went to buy the necessities, dishwashing liquid and soaps and basic food items, I found myself sort of feeling a sense of desperation, like maybe I should just buy something else or some other kind of emotional crutch. And I ended up doing so, sweets and some snacks and stuff. And it's like, what really struck me is that we do want to self-soothe. We do. I know everybody's been saying, oh, everybody's eating so much more. Of course you're going to eat more. You're at home all day and you're going through trauma. It's like, yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's not to say you have to sort of not be aware of it. And the same thing goes for alcohol, drinking, and smoking. I'm sure that people may have found, those people that do drink and do smoke, that they may have done so more now than they would in a typical weekend. Like there's an overhanging global pressure and stress and things that we haven't had before. So yeah, it makes sense that it happens, but be aware. I mean, be aware of that. Like I've had to hide some of the candy from myself. So, put it out of reach for myself and pretend that it's not there. So yeah, I think I'd like to know if you've experienced that, where if you had to go out, your experience, and what was it like when you went shopping for the basics? Did you also find yourself looking at things you didn't before, or was it sort of like, half of 3/4 of this stuff I don't need? It's like, can every single store across the board be like 3/4 smaller than it is? Really, truly. I mean, we've got some malls just in Johannesburg that are just, they're monolithic. And it's like, how many sunglass stores and clothing stores and jewelry stores do we need? How do these places sustain themselves? And if they do, what the heck? It makes sense why the majority of South Africans are in debt fairly deeply. But what was interesting was also this duality of, I don't need any more, but I want to keep some in case, and I want to get some sort of high density calorie snacks because there's something in my sort of, I don't know, caveman heritage of like, if those guys found honey or fat, must have been, that's like survival. I must have it. It's amazing. And so much of what we buy now is so crazily, I suppose, separate from what actually is important and keeps us maybe away from dealing with ourselves. But yes, right now I definitely needed some chocolate. You know what I mean? It's true. And also my thoughts go out to people where I mean, that's what I'm busy with, is thinking about whether or not to overspend when it comes to some luxuries. There are people who can't even look at the basics. And that's like, oh my God, like, hello, this is not okay. And it isn't going to be solved by a government. Like, I don't see that. It's just not adding up there. So I'm hoping that this whole shift of awareness sort of starts creating some small pockets of purposeful, coordinated assistance for groups that they themselves connect with. For example, I was thinking, changing the world as an idea. changing the world, like short of an actual virus, you as a person, you're not gonna fly around and change the world, and it's not going to work on that scale. It's not possible. And I think that's what paralyzes a lot of us, and me particularly. It paralyzes me. It's this idea of, well, if I can't help a large portion of the people that need the help, then I can't really do anything, And I think that's maybe reverse thinking. I think we've got to go more micro, a lot more micro. Like for me, I just realized, and South Africa, if you're not familiar with it, there is a culture of recycling which occurs where people arrive on the day where refuse is put out for the city to collect. And these guys come pulling trolleys, pulling these sort of wheeled platforms where they load up these large canvas bags full of whatever they may be able to get paid for to recycle. And from what I understand, a huge, massive bag, this thing it's massive. It's like 1.5 meters cubed, it's massive. That might yield 50 rand, $50, maybe. Enough to eat, it might, or even less. And I'm thinking just in terms of that, knowing that those people come, and I've seen in my road, is that on a Wednesday, those guys are there, and they respectfully look through the garbage. They don't make a huge mess. They're doing the best, and they're careful. But the fact that they have to do that when, for example, my complex, my estate that I live in, we could coordinate that we figure out what it is those guys need to give them ease of access by using maybe a clear set of refuse bags where we've already separated it for them. Not only that, but we could double up on certain basic items or necessities that we buy, and we could put those in the bags too. So it's like for that pocket of people, and it seems to me like in my road, it's like 10 guys. Those 10 people's lives are made a lot easier by quite a small outlay of effort and financial sacrifice on the side of individuals. Like it's not huge. It's not huge. I mean, if my estate, which is, I don't know, maybe 60 different apartments, units, if those guys, if we all put in 1 tin of food, it's 60 tins. That's like each person there who comes and digs through the garbage gets 6 tins of food. Like, holy moly. It can't be, well, yeah, our government isn't doing anything, but I'm not the government, so I can't. Like, there's something in small, micro, much smaller scale, and that's what I mean by the government as a concept. I think it's hamstrung our thinking about how we can be proactive in helping communities, and we don't have to. That whole save the whales, like, oh, we got to save the whales. It's such a broad, incredibly broad idea that no one can actually act on it, except the 1 or 2 loonies who actually do go on those ships and stop people from hunting whales. Like there's only room in society for a few of those people, and they exist and they do it, and they're very special. But I still think broad-based change happens through micro shifts in awareness. It doesn't happen from macro. Like, you don't work from the big picture down. It's got to start with little cascades, like dominoes. If everybody adds a little bit, it's the same as this, isn't it? It's the same as the situation with the lockdown. If little individual people do the right thing, the sum of that is much bigger than some kind of mass thing that is impossible, actually. Because when it comes down to it, you see the fact that individuals are responsible for a lot of the disorder. Like one person, and I read an article today about an old age home in the UK where they had 130 people being cared for there. One person came in, and it was like 111 of those elderly people were infected, and 30-something of them died, including, not necessarily died, but got infected, health workers. There were like 70 of them, and 40 of them contracted the illness. So it's like one person has such a monumental power when that one person's action is backed up by another and another and another. Same with the mob mentality. I mean, football hooliganism, isn't that? Looting. It's the same thing. It's like in a group, collectively, you think and act in different ways, but it comes down to the individual's ability to follow some sort of moral or ethical compass. Like, I'm not comfortable with the idea that those gentlemen should dig through the garbage right outside where I live. Like, why am I, and then why am I, A, not taking the steps needed for me to add to that, and then B, why don't I help galvanize that? And so what if 3/4 of us do it, or half, or 3 or 5? It doesn't really matter. Not everybody has to. That's the point. So that's what I've been thinking about when it comes to that. And that's sort of what triggered in my mind, is to see all these individuals in the shopping centers and go, wow, there's almost a sense of a feeling of unitedness. In and amongst that, if you're taking, X million people anywhere, there's always going to be people who are not doing the right thing. It's like on a YouTube video, right? I've never even seen a YouTube video where someone could be sharing their experiences of going through chemotherapy, and people will give it a thumbs down. People have talked about their battle with anxiety and depression, and people will comment, well, go and kill yourself. I mean, we have to expect that in the millions and millions and millions of minds out there, we've got to expect a complete range of behaviors. We have to, because there's a complete range of chemical makeups, experiences, backgrounds, feelings, needs, wants. So let's not be too paralyzed by that. It doesn't have to come through mass protest, because that also is sort of like one of the failings of the middle class, in my opinion, is that they can't take to the streets because they have far too much to lose. So this whole thing of, well, if we picket, if we go and lock down the country through not doing our job and going to stand on the street, that's going to do something. I think there is too much at stake for people in that bracket. When you have no damn food, damn straight I'm going to be on that road. If I don't have running water or a flushing toilet, and I have the opportunity to show my anger, you bet I'm on the street. But I haven't been in that situation. So how can I actually judge that? Like, for me, that's a bit short-sighted, because I've never been. And look at this, 5 days in, and some people are already starting to share like borderline, sort of concentration camp-like experiences. It's like, guys, it's been 5 days and already you're clawing at the walls. So we haven't had real suffering, not real ones, because when you have real suffering, then and you're quiet and you're grateful for what you get and you're humble. It just comes with a real pain. When the world has punched you in the face, then you kind of, there's humility there, and there's a whole mass of, I'd say, a couple of generations now that have never been really squarely having a couple of teeth knocked out. And that's kind of what we're grappling with, in a very comfortable, curated, and organized fashion, fairly well, and the fear is that even that organization will somehow collapse, because what's left then, individuals, they may be desperate individuals, and people are very afraid of that, because many desperate individuals leads to disorganization and panic and fear. So I think some of that can definitely be aided with the help of individual behavior, with some help to galvanize, without trying to make it some nationally big, because once it reaches that stage, it becomes about admin, and you lose track of what you're trying to achieve. It becomes an organization, and I appreciate that those exist, but the centralization of that, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. I think people can do really, really well in their suburbs. That's where I think, and don't they always say that, the police needs your assistance, the communities need to come together. Yeah, exactly right. And there's a whole bunch of these community watch groups and all of that kind of thing. And I think that's pretty noble. And I think some of that technical skill and some of that camaraderie for that particular thing can be used on a micro level to help people eat. I think if you're hungry and you're cold and you have nowhere to sleep, you are going to not feel okay about yourself. And when you don't feel okay about yourself, you can't get yourself out of a situation. And that whole idea of mindset is cool. having the right mindset. But when you are down there on Maslow's hierarchy and your stomach is hurting, there is no hierarchy. Being really hungry, truly hungry. I mean, people say, oh, I'm starving. Okay, well, times that by 4 days, Like, what are you then? Where are you then as an educated individual? Like 4 days without food, where are you? I'd love to know, because I know I would steal, without a doubt, to put food in front of my child and my wife. I would absolutely steal. And I wouldn't care who I would be stealing from. I would just have to, because I'd be an animal in that moment. I would have to be animal. I would have to be like any other animal. When they see somebody, like a bird, I see that often, birds eating, having a little snack, and then another one comes there and he's desperate and he's like, hell no, I'm taking this for myself. Happens through nature all the time. So let's not be too surprised when people get, desperate. That's happening. It happened in Italy. It's happening now. They had some looting, desperation, something happening there. Spain as well, some underlying. And then, of course, I mean, we're even more and more of a desperate situation. Yeah, people were already hungry before this. And I think that's a big one. How the hell do we feed people? Let's start there. Then we worry about other aspirations. So yeah, my experience out was fascinating in that it made me realize how important my own individual connection to the whole is. Like, I don't have to become a save the trees, save the whales person, because I could never do that. That is not in my DNA. But I can do my part in whichever small way I can, and I can maybe use that motivation to help someone else realize that too. Realize that you have agency. Realize that you have the ability to do something. Often we don't. Often, well, I'm just a teacher. I can't, what can I do? Or I'm just this, or I'm just that. And there they are, people on the front lines helping me, ringing up my food, making sure that I'm getting into a shopping center safely. There they are. And what do they go home to? That's an interesting question when so much of our entire country is built from the working class who are in need. It's just not enough. And I'm kind of wondering what my role in that is. And I don't know if you've, in these last few days, have had that kind of awareness, awakening. So I'd love to know. Please feel free to comment on this or message me directly. I would always appreciate any kind of thoughts or feedback. So that's day 5, everybody. I'm really hoping that your day was also interesting and insightful to you, and I hope that you stay safe, and I hope that you are careful, and I will speak to you all very, very soon for day 6. So until then, goodbye and keep well.